Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Thanks very much for joining us. Today, we're talking about disaster recovery as a service and how you, as a cloud service provider or managed service provider, can combine disaster recovery and cloud and take it to market in a way which is perhaps not nearly as difficult as you might think. My name's Steve Fenton. I'm part of the Virtuozzo marketing team, and I'm delighted that today we have two expert speakers to talk with you. First up, we have David Klauser. David runs the Virtuozzo sales team for North and South America, working with service providers to enable them to take their own alternative cloud services to market. And that's cloud as in infrastructure as a service, but also platform as a service and disaster recovery as a service, and in fact, anything as a service. And David will be talking about that in just a moment. We're also super pleased to have a special guest with us today, which is Joe Morgan. Joe, as many of you will know, is the founder and CEO of Joe's Datacenter, which is one of the most exciting Virtuozzo cloud providers in North America. And Joe's going to be talking to you about how he has used Virtuozzo to launch cloud services combined with disaster recovery and sell those to not just small and medium-sized enterprises, but also enabling managed service providers to take cloud and DR to their clients. So we're going to start with a short set of slides, brief presentation, then we'll move into a kind of panel discussion with Joe and David, and of course with all of you watching. So please do submit your questions at any time. You can do that using the question tool, which you'll find in your webinar client, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. If we don't get to yours, we'll follow up with you after the session. There's great expertise and experience here, so I encourage you to ask us anything. Last thing from me, we are recording this session, and we'll share a link to the recording in the next couple of days. So please stay with us for the next 30 or so minutes, ask as many questions as you'd like, and I will kick us off by handing over to David. Thank you, David.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And welcome again, everybody. As Steve said, I'm David Klauser with Virtuozzo, responsible for the Americas. And I'd first like to welcome everybody who is both joining us today and our guests and partners who will be playing this back. I know we've got attendees from all over the world, so we greatly appreciate your time. I'd just like to speak briefly on a couple things. One, for those who have not gotten an update about Virtuozzo and who Virtuozzo is and what we've evolved in, I'd like to give you a brief background and an update, because there's some really exciting things that are happening. And then I just will comment briefly on our focus in the alternative cloud and why that matters and why that's important to our partners. And then we'll get to the good stuff, which is how one of our flagship partners in Joe and Joe's Datacenter is extending and expanding his cloud maturity beyond just infrastructure as a service to be able to offer full disaster recovery as a service. So we've got some great content and some great things that I think will be helpful. So for those who aren't familiar with Virtuozzo, or maybe not of late familiar with Virtuozzo, what is really exciting and is the positioning that Virtuozzo's had over the last 20 years, for more than 2 decades, really starting out as container virtualization pioneers. And in doing so, being able to take a leadership position in the global hosting market share, as you can see here, with nearly 40% penetration rate. So for all of our hosters who may be joining us today, welcome. We've got some great additions. And for our cloud service providers, our managed service providers, our ISVs, as well as our other clients, we'd like to provide an update of how we have matured from beyond container virtualization to be able to offer the entire alternative cloud hyper-converged stack built on OpenStack for the service provider community, designed specifically by and for that service provider community that our origins have originated for more than 20 years. To present day, with more than 300 employees located worldwide, just about every market that you could imagine being covered, and supporting, as you can see here, more than 700,000 virtual environments across our entire virtualization platform. Our contributions to open source and OpenStack are also very important, coming from our roots. So you can see here, we're a major contributor there. And then what we're really proud of is beyond our 100+ patents, it's 115 here, I think by the end of the week, it'll probably be more, but is also the acquisitions that we made last year in both acquiring OnApp and Gelastic. And what that's done is that's allowed Virtuozzo to finish the entire alternative cloud maturity stack, from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service, to the entire cloud management layer, as well as anything as a service, DevOps, WordPress, disaster recovery as a service, which Joe will talk a little bit more on that. But really excited to be able to share that. And what has this journey allowed us to be able to serve and to accomplish? We are fast becoming the alternative cloud platform market leader, delivering a full stack hyper-converged cloud enablement designed specifically for you, for our service providers. So if we get to the next slide, I mentioned alternative cloud. What do we mean by alternative cloud, and why is this important? Well, quite simply, first, we mean anything that's a non-hyperscale. Why is this important? Well, if you look at the global cloud infrastructure market, latest numbers 181 billion, more than 20% of that is going to be consumed, demanded to be consumed from a non-hyperscale solution, whether it's because of the repatriation that's already happening for those workloads that are in the hyperscalers, or just workload and cloud maturity across multi-cloud and hybrid cloud. So there's flat out $30–40 billion addressable market for our service providers, where your customers are going to demand an alternative cloud, a non-hyperscale. And what Virtuozzo wants to be able to do is to provide you the simplest, turnkey, most mature, complete stack that's simple, affordable as in half the price of the hyperscalers, but 50, 60, 70% profit margins. So you can truly expand your business, extend your cloud maturity offerings, increase your MRR, ARR, ARPU, and of course, profit margins. Next slide. So I mentioned some of these numbers, okay, but they're real. And this is actually the latest numbers from Gartner, looking at the alternative cloud market and the various spends across infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. And the market is just demanding a turnkey alternative platform to be able to help take advantage of that market. And that's exactly what we are doing with our partners. We want to help fill the void in terms of cloud enablement, caused by what? Caused by the lack of elasticity, cost prohibitive from the hyperscalers, or costly complex solutions that might be perfect for the enterprise, but are not designed for you, for the service provider, with self-service, multi-tenancy, simplicity, and with your needs in mind. And that's exactly what we cater to. Next slide. So this is, and again, Joe is going to quickly get a lot deeper, but this is a great slide showing actually a couple examples of our user interface with the simplicity of the self-service capabilities of the alternative cloud, being able to address every layer of the cloud infrastructure stack, as I mentioned earlier, by being able to deploy a hyper-converged, software-defined, opinionated open stack on what? On your infrastructure, if you choose to own, manage, or operate your own infrastructure, or on one of our anchor CSPs infrastructure, like Joe, if you're a managed service provider who has no interest or desire to have to manage and deploy your own infrastructure, but you most certainly would like to expand your managed service offerings beyond perhaps just backup to disaster recovery and the entire anything as a service offerings that Virtuozzo makes possible. And in particular, as you see here, the use case we're focusing on today is, of course, backup, data protection, disaster recovery. And then that, of course, dovetails into the entire cybersecurity stack and offerings. And what we're really proud to share with you and to show you today is this isn't rocket science. Virtuozzo and our partners have figured it out, that this is simple and we can complement what you're already doing today, and we can help you get to market quickly and profitably to start better servicing your customers with a robust disaster recovery as a service and data protection solution today. So then the last slide that I just wanted to share with you all is, what are we passionate about? What is Virtuozzo's commitment and our value proposition to each of you today and ongoing? Of course, never forget, we are built and designed for you. We are designed for the service provider, and that will continue to be the case from our current offerings as well as our future. You could just click all of them. Of course, it's got to be simple. We must be able to provide you easy use that translates to your customers. And we should complement what you're already doing, of course, supporting multi-cloud. And we don't just attempt to provide you a technology. You are our partners, and we care about your success. We have proven methodologies to help you accelerate your sales and your marketing, programs to help expand and expend new offerings. What should they be priced at? What should your profit margins be? What should your conversion rates be? We've got this figured out. We've been doing it for more than 20 years. So we love nothing more than we get a new partner who adopts an alternative cloud, complements what they're already doing, and wants to go to market with new offerings, such as disaster recovery as a service. Because your profitability is paramount. We're not successful in terms of enabling your consumption unless we can enable your profitability and help accelerate top line. So with that, I will turn it over to Joe, and there is no better example of a Virtuozzo partner who has accomplished what I've just referenced, and I'm very excited for him to share you a little bit more on what he's doing for DR. Joe?
Yeah, wow. I want to say hi to everyone that's joined, and I of course want to thank Steve and David and the team at Virtuozzo for giving me the opportunity to be here. That was quite an introduction, and I hate having to follow after David, right? He just is obviously so passionate about this industry, and he's done a ton for me, working directly with him, and so I really do want to say thank you to everyone at Virtuozzo. But let's get into it here. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. I am Joe Morgan. I'm the owner and founder of Joe's Datacenter. I actually started this business in 2008 as a solution for my parents' web hosting business. I thought they were paying way too much for their hosting and that I could do it better. And that's now obviously spiraled out of control. No, I started with their one server, and now we own and operate our own physical infrastructure. So we are a infrastructure provider with serving as a data center. We have public and private cloud offerings that we are currently doing through Virtuozzo. We also provide bare metal servers, which was always kind of our bread and butter and the start of our business, and co-location. And then we do backup, cybersecurity, and disaster recovery as a service, which is obviously what we're going to be talking about today. But I did want to talk a little bit about how we got here as a company. I talked about how we started this as a solution for my parents, and then we realized that it could benefit and help other people as well. The same thing has kind of happened several times throughout our business as it's grown. As we started adding all these different product offerings on and working through the complexities of these, we had partners that were coming to us and saying, hey, Joe, we're struggling to figure out how to offer those same solutions. And so at the end of last year, we actually came up with what we call the MSP Accelerator Program, where we took all of this together and bundled it as a turnkey solution that we can give MSPs so that they can sell all of these solutions running on our infrastructure and our data center and our expertise, powered by the back-end software of Virtuozzo and Acronis, to kind of give us the full stack individual products that MSPs can sit there and turnkey sell.
Yeah. And hey, Joe, I promised I wouldn't interrupt to like the third slide, but you just made me think of something. So for those data center providers that are with us today, those regional data center providers, talk about quickly as you've transitioned from selling 60, 70 racks of dedicated servers at maybe a few thousand a month in terms of MRR, and simply converting those to alternative cloud providers and what that's done just from an MRR per rack perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we're, like you said earlier, we're half the price of the hyperscalers, and yet our profit margins are much, much higher. The licensing is great, and it's built on technology that allows this stuff to be, for the most part, put on commodity server equipment that's out there. And so, we actually ditched a huge proprietary SAN system that was costing us tons of money when we moved to these solutions. And we're seeing about 10x what we were getting per rack before. And so, I mean, huge differentiation in where we were and where we're at. Not to mention, the customers that are sitting on these bare metal servers, they're very stagnant, right? Like they build it on there, it sits on there, but it's very hard for them to upgrade. It's very hard for them to implement newer technology. It doesn't get any of the benefits of virtualization. And then there's those individual hardware problems that can crop up, which we'll actually talk a little bit about how backup and disaster recovery as a solution can fix some of those things. But there's all of that stuff too, that moving these people to the cloud, they get all these huge benefits that come along with it as well.
Yeah.
And then let's actually go on to the next slide, because I do want to talk a little bit about why it is that we decided to build our solutions with Virtuozzo. We are very passionate about open source, and we wanted to build on top of OpenStack. OpenStack is a platform for being able to do virtualization with high resiliency and reliability, but it was too complex for most people to integrate and run themselves. And so Virtuozzo came in, this industry leader. We've been using their virtual containers, or I've known about their virtual containers for 20 years. They were kind of the pioneers of virtualization, and they said, hey, we can give this to you so that you can run it on your infrastructure and now sell cloud services to your clients. And then, with Acronis, we started with just their backup solutions. And that's, Acronis, industry leader since, early 2000s. Their solution was mostly based around backups when we started with them. And now it's full cybersecurity suite, disaster recovery as a service tied directly into our cloud offering through Virtuozzo. So now it's like this kind of full package from the ground up. And we're actually getting ready to go live with one of the new companies that Virtuozzo acquired to offer platform as a service as well. And I'm going to have the Virtuozzo team mad at me because I'm going to throw this out here live for the first time, but I'm hoping to do a webinar and getting Virtuozzo to help me on that platform as well, because I think it's really amazing. But let's go ahead and move on, and let's talk a little bit more about the disaster recovery as a service. So,
yeah, and hey Joe,
yeah.
Sorry. So I just thought it might be a good time to interrupt again.
Yeah,
but
sure.
As we're going through this, we have a very diverse audience here today, right? I just want you to know, whether you're a CSP or a provider that is looking to replicate what Joe's sharing with you on your existing infrastructure, or like I said, you're an MSP or a service provider who doesn't want to own or operate, just know that we are supporting both tracks. This is applicable. Customize a solution that's right for your business. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's actually one of the benefits of working with a company like Virtuozzo or Acronis, is that you can kind of dip your toes in and start out at any level. You can be someone who relies on a partner like me, and we provide kind of everything and give it to you turnkey, or you can individually piece those things together, or you can build your own solution exactly like we have. If you're an infrastructure provider, we have partners that run some of it on their own and some of it through us. So this is definitely, we're not creating this from scratch. We're building this solution on top of stuff that's out there that was custom built for MSPs specifically, and that that is a good differentiator. And I'm glad you brought that up, David. Thank you.
Thanks, bud. Yep.
So disaster recovery. Why is this needed? Essentially, any business can suffer downtime due to lots of different reasons, whether it be natural causes or human error. And so one of the important things that I want to discuss today as part of discussing disaster recovery is that you need to have a plan in place, and you need to test that plan. And one of the things that I see happen often is that people will have a backup job in place, and they'll think that they're fine. And then what they find out is those backups don't work. or that their backup wasn't off-site, and so a local failure causes this a total loss of both their data and their backups, or it's just an accident because the people who were setting it up were building it on older systems that were too complex, and they didn't actually have the level of reliability that they assumed they did. And so you shouldn't, as an MSP or an end user business out there, assume that the plan that you have in place is good enough for the world we live in today. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about is kind of what the old way of doing things was. That'll be on this next slide, and what the new solution to this problem is. And so the old way of doing things, and we can go to the next slide, is that we would go to a company and they'd say, hey, we can't afford to have any type of downtime. What are our options? And so we'd say, well, we need to get backups in place. You need to have local backups for fast recovery. You need to have offsite backups. And then if you have to be able to have a disaster recovery scenario, then you're going to basically have to duplicate your entire IT infrastructure at an offsite location. Well, what did this do is that immediately made the barrier to entry so high that most small businesses and medium-sized businesses just could not afford to have that level of reliability and redundancy in place. So disaster recovery was completely out of the picture. Does that, I've heard crazy stories about what is your disaster recovery plan? Well, if there's a fire, we're running inside and we're grabbing the hard drive that's external, that's attached to the server in the room, and we're taking it out with us. Obviously, these are not good solutions, right? But those were the things that people were kind of forced to piecemeal together themselves because it was so expensive and complex. The learning curve was so high, and most MSPs just didn't even want to get into that industry because they knew that those weren't solutions that their customers could afford. So the new way of doing things is that we offer all of this as a service. And what that means is we've taken all of that complexity and we've wrapped it into a single web interface that makes that entire process streamlined. So you as an MSP or your end user, they log into this web interface, they have one piece of software that they install either on the hypervisor protecting all of the VMs underneath it, or inside of one dedicated bare metal server, whether it be at a data center or on premise, or maybe that is a cloud virtual machine, but you don't want to obviously not have backups on that either. And so it's one vendor, one interface, one agent, an easy licensing structure to do all of this. And you can actually see here on this slide on the right side, that's actually taken from that web interface. You can see it's just on that individual device, you set up a backup job and a disaster recovery plan all in that one place, and it's pretty much good to go. So those complexities that I talked about before, you don't have to duplicate your hardware because you can take advantage of the fact that in our public cloud, we have all of that infrastructure sitting waiting to go. So that's just an immediate upfront saving on that capital expenditure. And then the second is it's much easier to design and set that up as well. And then I went to go to the,
Joe, that also reminds me of one of the most common points of entry for our MSPs to be able to go to small, medium, even large enterprise is to ask them to identify a handful of production workloads of production VMs and just let them prove to you that you could simply take on the backup and the DR target of those. Start with 10 VMs, 50 VMs.
And this solution was designed for enterprise, right? But it's been simplified to the process so much that it now fits those small businesses and those medium-sized businesses as well. So this really isn't, I'm going to talk a lot because that's the area I focus on the small and medium-sized business, but this really was an enterprise solution, and it can work with a single server if you want to get started and try it out, or as an MSP or as a provider, be able to say, hey, let us show you how well this works. And that's built in, baked into the system as well. And I'm actually going to discuss that a little bit as we move on here. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And I want to dig into, I know it's going to be a little bit technical, but I want to talk about how it actually all fits together and how it actually works. And the way that happens, and I touched on this a second ago, is the administrator is going to log into this one central web interface where they manage everything. And they're going to set up that backup job for whatever type of infrastructure that is that they're wanting to back up. So it could be running on any of the most popular hypervisors out there, or it can be individually inside of single machines. What happens on the back end is we take an entire backup of that machine and we put it into the cloud. Now you have all of the benefits of having offsite backups, right? Following the standard backup rules of now I've got a copy of my data, I have a copy of my data that's offsite, and we just sit there and we copy the changes as needed. You set up your normal backup schedule, and I won't get into that because that's kind of a whole nother topic, but let's assume now, okay, you're set up and you've got these offsite cloud backups. Those actually use our infrastructure at our locations. So when that backup happens, it's not going to just some random place in the cloud, it's going to Joe's data center on our equipment at our location, right? Well, we already talked about how we have all these public cloud offerings through Virtuozzo at our location as well, and that's kind of where the magic happens. What we have done is we've said, hey, you've got these backups, they're on site with us already, we've got this cloud offering so we can run virtual machines on our infrastructure locally through our OpenStack Virtuozzo cluster. So what we've done and what we've been enabled to do with Acronis is be able to enable disaster recovery on that backup job. And when you enable disaster recovery, what happens is when that backup job happens, it sits as a virtual machine in our cloud ready to run. And so that's running on our infrastructure at our data center, immediately taking that latest backup that you had and putting it into production, whether it be just to test the whole setup or whether it to be to actually be able to have you fail over because your location has gone down for whatever reason. And so that's how everything fits together. But from you as an administrator of this, you still just use that one simple management and web interface to be able to take care of all of that. And the next step for you, if you decide this is something you want to do, is that you need to start planning this out. I talked earlier about how important it was for that planning process. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll talk about how you get started with that. So we sign you up, we put you into our program, you go into that web interface, and what we have is something called runbooks. And what a runbook is it's a tool that you can use to help build that disaster recovery plan inside of our system. And we talk here about RTOs, which means, you know, there's a limited amount of time that a business can be offline before they start having serious financial repercussions because of the loss of their business being able to operate during that downtime. And that's what RTO is in reference to. It's the amount of time that can pass before you need to be back up and running again. And so what this runbook does is allows you in this web interface through a nice little drag and drop editor to be able to put in there that I have this machine that needs to be able to recover. You can put the steps that are necessary to convert from offsite to local. We can get into more details onto that one-on-one if you want to go into, you know, how we connect the network back to your location securely through VPNs, or how we change DNS and all that stuff. Those are all parts of this that are built in and easy and to use, but are maybe a little out of the scope of this webinar and would take too long. But once that run book is set up, what it's doing is it's basically building that plan for you. So now inside of this, you have exactly the steps that are going to have to take place during a disaster. And if you're an MSP, this adds an opportunity for you to be able to sell an additional service to your clients, not just the disaster recovery as a service, but the testing of this as well, right? Like you don't want to find out that your plan doesn't work during a disaster. And so this should be something where this plan is updated as the technology changes internally, and it should be something that you review on a semi-annual or an annual basis. And this lets you go in as part of that run book and say, hey, we're going to test a failover scenario. We're not actually going to go into production, but I'm going to go into that run book that shows me the steps, and I'm going to say, let's test it, and it'll actually spin it up as a virtual machine running in our cloud. You can make sure it works. You can test how long it took. It's only a few clicks. You're guided through the entire process, and now you have visibility into that orchestration that is happening on the back end to make all of this happen. And then let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And that is obviously that you need to be able to fail back as well. And so this automates that entire process all the way up to where you're now running in the cloud, and also for the failback process as well. And one thing I really liked about this slide, and the reason I wanted to include it, is it's got a nice picture of that web interface that I've been talking so much about. You can see that right there is the same, you know, easy to use interface that we use for our backups. Also now just directly has disaster recovery integrated in. When it's time to recover, you just click a button that says, you know, we want to be able to recover, and it'll take a backup of that machine now running in our cloud. It'll transition you to be running back on site again, and then you can shut down that cloud instance, and that's all guided to you through that runbook as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next part of this, which is your compliance tracking and increasing your SLA, excuse me. So as part of knowing and having that plan in place of how quickly you need to get back up and running, you also need to know how far back that you can go, and that's what RPO is. And a lot of times you're going to hear people when they talk about disaster recovery, those are kind of the two metrics that you're supposed to be incorporating into your plan. A, how quickly can we recover, and B, how far back are we willing to go? That's kind of your data freshness is kind of what people talk about. And so in this interface, you have the ability to track that as well. That's a huge benefit to you as an MSP, right? Because if you're trying to sell this product to a client, you need to be able to know that you can meet the expectations that you've set forth. And so you go in there, you set up the backup job, you test it, and then immediately you get this nice interface that shows you exactly how long it took, whether you met the thresholds that you've discussed with your client, allows you to adjust this because obviously the technology changes. And so you can always be up to date and know that you're going to have a process that works reliably each time. Yeah,
nothing positions you better than understanding the workload characteristics of what is the RPO, what is the RTO. Once you earn the trust of your clients in terms of disaster recovery, it positions you perfectly to now start earning the trust of their production workloads and being able to have this workload portability across your own data centers.
And it's not just trust from the customer too, it's confidence in your own abilities to do these things as well, right? Like what company, and a lot of smaller MSPs, they're like, well, I don't want to put myself on the line and say that I'm going to be offering the disaster recovery if they don't really know how the system works, or it was so complex the way it used to be before. And so MSPs just didn't even look at that as a market opportunity for them, right? When the customer said, hey, we have to have a disaster recovery plan in place, what happens when the server you set up for us crashes, right? They basically said, oh, well, you're going to have to go to a company that specializes in this. Well, the problem is that company that specializes in this is going to take over their entire IT infrastructure, and you're basically giving away your client, right? And so this gives the MSP the confidence to be able to say, hey, I understand how it works. It's simple. I can test it. I know exactly what is going to happen when there's a disaster, and now you're ready to sell it, So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And here I just want to kind of wrap everything that I've just talked about up. I know during a webinar we're short on time, and there's been questions that have come in. I want to make sure I'm respecting everybody's time, but this full product offering gives you the benefits of higher margins for you as an MSP, or if you're doing this in-house, right? Because this is a much cheaper solution than what has ever traditionally been out there before. Even the other companies that are offering solutions like this, they are not priced in such a way for resellability. They're really specialty white glove services where this has been built for MSPs and internal in-house IT departments. So it's been built for you to be able to have control of this. So that lowers your costs, obviously. You can, win more clients. You now have a bigger product offering that you're able to sell, with verifiable service level agreements that you can put in place that you trust and understand. That's what we were just talking about. Not to mention you benefit from the decrease in training costs, licensing, duplicate infrastructure, all of those hard costs normally up front to be able to get into this have just kind of gone away, right? So you as an MSP can get in there and start using these solutions right away. And then when you offer this full stack, now I'm not talking about just backups and disaster recovery as a service, but as when you start offering, hey, I'm an MSP that can do public cloud, private cloud, I can do co-location, I can do backups, disaster recovery, cybersecurity, then you're going to gain this huge stickiness with your clients, right? Because now they can get everything from you, and those other vendors aren't going to be able to come and take those clients away from you, or you're not going to be giving pieces of the business away. It's all one solution that you're offering your clients. And so there's really no reason not to be able to, just kind of turnkey start selling this and taking advantage of the solutions that we've put in and then in place here today. So after this, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to David. I think he's got a little bit more that he's got going to talk about promotions that we're doing here, and then we're hopefully going to get into some question and answers.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to say that that is exactly what we mean. Joe talks about offering the entire stack. When we talk about how Virtuozzo is now filling the gap for the alternative cloud for the service provider in terms of being able to enable you to deliver a profitable cloud business and cloud services, right? With the software that's designed for you that complements what you're already doing. This can be cross-sold into your existing customers as well as driving new, as Joe mentioned, but to help accelerate time to market with the simplicity of a unified console, simple deployment, simple go-to-market, but with maximum profitability. So with that, we thought we would offer a promotion, might be meaningful for some of you, and that is for anyone who is attending this today or who completes the playback, whether you would like to deploy an alternative cloud and build this out on your infrastructure, or you simply want to sign up as an MSP and get to market now, today, tomorrow, we are going to offer 6 months of no cost in terms of the advanced disaster recovery on the storage side and anything else that we can do to complement from a sales and marketing, but we want to minimize the point of entry, give you an incentive to get to market, and make your initial sales even more profitable with this. So just email info@virtuozzo.com, but each of you will also receive a follow-up directly from us. So just let us know if you're interested. We could talk more about what that means. But other than that, we'll turn it back to Steve, go through some Q&As. I want to thank Joe, as always, and thank everyone for their time.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Joe. That was awesome. Yeah, just a reminder, anybody watching, you have questions, please ask them in the questions box. While we get to a couple of the questions that have come in, Joe, I actually wanted to ask you, when your customers come to you for disaster recovery, is that typically before or after they've had a problem?
Yeah, unfortunately, most people don't plan for a disaster. And so what happens is they assume that the IT person has done something right, or they make the assumption that, hey, it's in the cloud, it's backed up, we don't need it, which, there's a lot of different reasons, whether it be, we talked earlier about that behavioral users could be the issue. What happens when data is accidentally deleted, right? Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean that there can't be causes other than hardware failure that make you go down. And so a lot of times people, it's not that they're just negligent. They think they have backups. They think they put their systems in reliable vendors, and they just don't fully understand because they didn't put that plan in place. They didn't really look at it, and so unfortunately, it takes kind of a disaster to happen before they realize that, hey, we made it out of this. Unfortunately, a lot of companies don't after a disaster, but now all of a sudden we should have this plan in place. And I think with this package and the solution that we have, from a cost standpoint, there's really no reason why any company should go without a disaster recovery plan and process in place. And it doesn't have to be everything, right? You don't have to have your entire infrastructure bottom to top, but you've got that one server that's got your billing system in it that's the most critical, and you can't afford to have your employees redo that stuff. At least get that set up on something like this, and then just maybe a slower recovery process for the stuff that isn't as important. That's part of making that plan, is figuring those things out. But I would definitely say don't wait until a disaster strikes to find out that you're at risk here. So, and that's unfortunately the way most people are. Hopefully, putting this webinar out there will help with some of that. But
yep.
Thanks. We have a question here from chat. Simple question: is the platform multi-tenant? I guess the answer to that is yes, right, David, by design?
Yep, absolutely. Right, Joe? Self-service, multi-tenant, custom branded for the MSP. So absolutely.
It actually has hierarchical multi-tenancy, which means that you, as a partner of Joe's Datacenter, let's say, have the ability to then have your own resellers and your own important partners underneath you. And it gives you always the ability to choose upstream who has access to what features, what locations, and then they then can do the same for their partners underneath them or the end customers. So, Joe's Data Center, we use our own platform. We use this own solution for ourselves internally. So Joe's Data Center is a customer account under the Joe's Data Center master account where we put everybody else, and then we use it just like any end user would.
Yep. Very important along the lines of being built by and for our service providers. Have to have simplicity with the multi-tenancy.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's part of having that easier. Sorry, not to interrupt you, Steve, but that's part of having an easier billing and licensing model too. Because this was a solution built for MSPs, it was built with pricing in mind for resellers. And so if you're using these products internally in-house, you just get kind of a cheaper solution than what you would needing. But for resellers, it means profitability. It means margins that before you were giving up that you can now keep. So
yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think to many of the 6-7 figure backup and DR deals I've done with the enterprise, the other thing that we didn't mention is not just the elasticity of this, but the pay as you sell model, right? Now, clearly there's some options in terms of commits and discounting, but what's beautiful is there's no real point of entry for you to be able to go to market, and you pay as you sell it.
Yeah, we actually have MSP partners that are one-man shop that didn't even have a website, and as part of this program, without any major capital investment from them, we've given them completely turnkey ability to sell all of this stuff, which is really amazing, right? Because we're now actually targeting that part of the market that desperately needs this stuff, that for whatever reason before just didn't think it was feasible or possible, and we've empowered an MSP to be able to make margins doing that, right? So I mean that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, Armando is asking, does the runbook tool include checkpoint/approvals to control and validate the DR process?
Yeah, so the way the runbooks work is that is not fully automated. What it is you're going in and putting the steps in place that are necessary in order for you to fail over during that disaster recovery scenario. So at each one of those steps that you put in, you put what the next course of action is and whether it's then automated. So you go into the runbook and you say, this is at the point in time which we need to actually spin the VM up. Now you go click and it spins the VM up. But that's you as a MSP or an in-house IT person, going through that process. And this is just keeping track of that plan and putting all of the things that are necessary so that you know that when it's done, you're going to be at the operational status that you've designed it for, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers the question.
And here's what's beautiful is if you truly would like to see what the run books and how they work, send an email to info@virtuozzo.com and we will set you up with your account so you can have access.
Yeah, of course we could do one-on-one demos and get people in there so they can actually play with this and look at it. And that's part of why that promotion was so great, right? Is because it gives you the opportunity to just look at it. Because I think you'll find, hey, this is like almost like a guided interface for setting up something that used to be so complex that you'll immediately see the benefits of it.
Yep.
Okay, I think we probably have time for a couple more questions. We're at 3/4 of an hour already because we have so much to say. Is Acronis part of the Virtuozzo cloud platform? Oh, I see. The question is, can I back up tenants from within Virtuozzo cloud, from within VHI, David?
Yeah, I might handle this if that's okay, David. So assuming I fully understand the question, one of the things that's kind of really great about this is that we on the back end use the direct integration to be able to take that Acronis backup and spin it up into our cloud. But from the Acronis side, it can be backed up from anywhere, whether that's backing up as a hypervisor installation in Virtuozzo, where it can back up all the VMs without even having to have software installed inside of the virtual machines themselves. It can do it from the hypervisor level, or it can be just an agent that's installed inside of any OS, Linux, Windows, of any system sitting anywhere, whether that be in the cloud, whether that be on the physical machine that's in the closet at your local on-premise location. It doesn't really matter, and it'll work with this solution as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but in terms of protecting the workloads in Virtuozzo's cloud platform, it is the recommended and ideal enterprise class solution to protect and provide DR for Virtuozzo cloud platform workloads.
Yeah, and there's direct integration built into the product for that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we'll take one more. It's a question from Ahmed. Interesting, just relates to what you were just talking about, David. Maybe we have to estimate this, but compared to using something like, I don't know, VMware plus Veeam, what kind of TCO reduction are we looking at, roughly?
I mean, I'll defer to Joe because he lives it real world, but I can just say I've ran many ROI and TCO models with many partners, and on average, it's about 50%, Joe. That I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, VMware by itself is very expensive. So Virtuozzo is one of the most competitive when it comes to enterprise ready hypervisors, especially when you talk about high availability cloud-based solutions. It's one of the only that can even do it, but it's still even cheaper than just running those hypervisors locally. And then from the Acronis standpoint, it is like we talked about, MSP focused and reseller focused on pricing as well. So you're basically Veeam. I'm not exactly 100% on the cost of Veeam. We looked at it when we originally went to our solution 3 or 4 years ago, and at that point in time, we were competitively advantaged against them, except with a much larger feature set that came with Acronis. And that's really where you get the advantage that I see, is that one agent we talked about, and I didn't stress on it much. I mentioned it, but that one agent means that's one license fee that you're paying for both backups, antivirus, anti-malware, anti-ransomware, the ability to manage that remote machine, patch management, software management. You can do smart status of the hard drives. You can use it as your remote tool to get in. You can deploy software through it. That's one agent, one license. So you can't really compare that against Veeam, because even if the price is exactly the same, you as an MSP or an end user organization that just has to manage all of these sprawling pieces of technology, you get to do us all from one place. So the TCO at that point in time, it's not even comparable. I mean, the solution with Acronis and Virtuozzo is much cheaper if you take everything into account.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Well, we're already well over time.
And Steve, I was just going to say, we've got some. I was just going to say quickly, we've got some great TCO models because it's really multidimensional. There's TCO at the infrastructure layer of VMware or hyperscalers, and then at each layer up the stack, there's additional TCO that we can model out with you. So, good question. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thank you. We're already well over time, so I don't want to take up any more of anybody's time. We have plenty more to talk about. There are more questions about pricing and integrations. We'll get back to all of you with answers to those questions just as soon as we can. Don't forget the promotion that David and Joe talked about, with 6 months free. Contact us about that or about anything to do with cloud or DR at info@virtuozzo.com. You can find more information at the Virtuozzo website. And of course, you're an MSP looking for a super simple turnkey way to take this stuff to market, head to joesdatacenter.com, where you'll be able to learn everything that you need to learn. With that, I'd like to thank you, David, for your time. Thank you so much, Joe, for your presentation today. And thank you to everybody who joined us, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yep.